I was 25 years old when this happened, and looking back, I still can't fully believe that it went down the way that it did. For context, I used to smoke weed regularly, mostly for fun, but also to help with my insomnia. The only problem? It made me paranoid. Not in some cute, oh no, the FBI is listening sort of way, but in a full-blown, someone's hiding in my house kind of way. I tried switching to vaping my THC because it was easier and it gave a better high. But the paranoia? It only got worse. I convinced myself I was being watched, to the point where I strategically hid knives around my apartment, in case I needed to defend myself from these hypothetical intruders. I knew I was being ridiculous, but I couldn't stop. Instead of putting the knives back where they belonged, I just bought more. 4 extra ones for the kitchen, plus a huge butcher's knife with an orange rubber cover. And for some reason, when I got home, I felt compelled to put that one into my purse. It just stayed there. After a while, it blended in with all the random junk that I carried. Receipts, gum wrappers, tampons. I stopped questioning it. I figured I'd never need it anyway, right? Till one night. It was a Friday evening, and I had just finished my shift at work. I went outside, took a few quick vape pulls, popped in some eye drops, and got ready to head home. But before I could leave, my manager told me that my coworker had bailed on cleanup, so I was tasked with staying and locking up. Now, I wasn't about to argue. I was a little too high for that. So I just grumbled my way through it and stayed way later than I wanted to. By the time that I finally got out, it was late. I wasn't as high anymore, but I also wasn't completely sober. And instead of getting a ride, I made the terrible decision to walk home. In my head, my apartment wasn't far, maybe a 10-15 minute walk, but the streets were empty. And the further that I got from work, the quieter that it became. I'm now a few blocks away from my job, and I notice a man dressed in dark clothes step around the corner ahead of me. He was wearing a big jacket and a ball cap. Strange, considering that it wasn't that cold. At first, that's all I thought of it. But as I kept walking, he slowed his pace to the point that he was now behind me. And then he crossed the street to my side. That's when my paranoia kicked in full force. I couldn't shake that feeling that something was off here. My skin was tingling, and every instinct in my body screamed that this wasn't normal. So I did what any anxious person would do. I crossed the street to the other side, but he followed. All right, the red flags were now confirmed. I felt my stomach drop, and giving the last benefit of a doubt that I could muster, I wanted to test it again. So I crossed the street one more time, and so did he. At that moment, my brain all but short-circuited. I knew that this guy wasn't just some guy walking home. He was following me. I was now hyper-aware of everything around me. There were no other people, no witnesses, no help. Just me and this creep on an empty street. I got this feeling that I wasn't going to be able to outrun him. I'm not exactly an athlete, and he was way too close for comfort now. And out of nowhere, that's when a thought hit me. You're not unarmed. I remember the knife at the bottom of my purse. With my bag slung in front of me, I did my best to discreetly rummage inside of it until my fingers wrapped around the handle. A huge wave of relief washed over me as I pulled it out and removed that orange cover. The blade even glinted at me under the streetlights. When I turned back around, he was now way closer to me. I froze, facing him, and for a moment, we both just stood there, staring at each other. I couldn't see his expression. His cap had cast a shadow over his face, but I knew that he saw the knife. It was clear that he hadn't expected this. Something about that realization sent a jolt of energy through my body. I felt confident, strong. The knife in my hand was a power shift, and I felt it. And then I took a step forward. He shifted uncomfortably, stepping back, and that tiny movement triggered something predatory in my ancient lizard brain. Charge him, is what my brain said. And I don't know where the instinct came from, but suddenly, I was running full bore right at him. He panicked. He nearly tripped over himself trying to turn around, and I had covered some good ground. So as he bolted, I swung the knife that I hadn't even realized that I reared back with, downward, catching the fabric of his coat. It snagged for just a second, and he must have felt it because the next thing I knew, he was full on sprinting for his life. And me? I chased him. I don't know what came over me. Maybe it was adrenaline. Maybe it was pure rage, but something about seeing him run, him being scared of me, flipped a switch in my head. I wanted him to feel hunted. He was fast, so there was no way of me catching him. But when he looked over his shoulder to see just how far away I was, he stumbled. And that moment was glorious. I don't know if he rolled his ankle or just panicked, but suddenly, his run became a limp. I must have actually laughed, because he looked back, eyes wide with terror. No longer was I the helpless girl walking home. I was the thing that he was afraid of, and I loved it. Until a single rational thought broke through the haze. What are you going to do if you catch him? And that thought hit me like a brick. I immediately stopped. The moment I did, my entire body started to shake. The adrenaline drained out of me all at once, and what replaced it was panic. What the f*** had I just done? Had I really just chased a man down with a knife? Did I try to stab him? My heart hammered in my chest as I watched him disappear around the corner, that limp of a run fading off into the darkness. And then, like the coward I really was, I turned and ran the other way. I sprinted home, locking the door behind me like that would somehow erase what had just happened. I collapsed onto the kitchen floor, hands trembling violently as I tried to drink some water, but half of it ended up on my face, and I think I cried a little bit. Sitting there replaying everything in my head, reality sank in. I was lucky that I hadn't gotten hurt, arrested, or even worse. I knew without a doubt that now was my time to stop vaping. Time to stop with weed altogether. While that paranoia may have saved my life, I think it also made me reckless, an easy target. Walking home late at night and high was a stupid decision, and I was done making those. I flushed my vape juice down the toilet. I pulled the knife out of my purse and placed it on the counter. I considered even throwing it away, but after it had been so useful that night, that would have seemed like a rather unceremonious way to go. So I held on to it. It's actually tucked away in one of my purses to this day. Sometimes I like to think that maybe, just maybe, that creep that had a weird motive for following me still has nightmares about when I turn the tables on him. Hey guys, if you're into the content that we create, we've got a Patreon where you can support the show and get early access to new episodes before everyone else. Just head on over to patreon.com/Malevolent Mischief or check the link in the description and join our community today. On April 30th, 2019, I was staying at the Crossroads Hotel in Kansas City, Missouri. I was there for 2 weeks for work, but with nothing to do over the weekend and no friends in town. So at around 9 p.m., I decided to have a drink at the bar by myself. I had just ordered my first beer, and I have to emphasize ordered here. I hadn't received the drink. Therefore, I wasn't drunk, and my mental state was still 100% clear. That's when a girl tugged on my shirt. She was supremely attractive, and I was single at the time, so I turned to say hello. She whispered in my ear that the man next to me was being really creepy, and if I would help her out and pretend to be her boyfriend. She even offered to buy me my next drink. I'll be honest, I thought this was just a line, but I obliged because, frankly, she was a smoke show. But there really was an old man late 50s, maybe early 60s, rocking back and forth in his chair next to her. Eyes half open, clearly two sheets to the wind. The kicker to his look was this man was dressed in a full tuxedo. I asked him about the tux, and he said that his daughter just got married that day. The wedding party had a room block at the hotel, and he was keeping the post-reception tab open at the bar. At this point, he started blatantly hitting on the girl. Let's call her Rachel, saying how beautiful she was and how lucky I was to have such a beautiful girlfriend while staring at her. I really felt for this poor girl, and all women honestly, in that very moment. Then Rachel wrapped her arms around my waist and said, "Yep, this is my boyfriend. I love him to death. I'd kill for this guy." The guy rocked back and forth in his chair once more and then goes, No, I get it. I've killed for love before." Rachel and I looked at each other. I thought I had misheard him. I'm sorry, what did you say?" I said, "I've killed for love before." For the next 10 minutes, this man proceeded to tell us about this supposed murder that he had committed. It was his ex-wife's boyfriend. From what I could tell, he was divorced, most likely reluctantly. His wife remarried, and he got jealous of the guy. He told us how he killed him. A Glock 37, shot 3 times, twice in the chest, once in the head. In addition to what he did with the body, wrapped in black plastic bags, went fishing in the lake behind his house one morning and threw it overboard with weights tied to the legs. I could tell that he was suspicious of us asking so many questions, and that's when I figured that it was time to leave. Then, and I was proud of this, I actually got his name. I said, "It was nice to meet you, Mr." And he filled in the blank. The next morning, I asked the front desk manager, who I'd become friends with over years of traveling there, if there was someone staying at the hotel with that name. She said she couldn't give me a room number due to security reasons, but confirmed that someone was staying there with that name. I called the Kansas City Police Department tip hotline and told them everything I knew. I have a tipster ID number and everything. I check maybe once a month or so to see if there's been any arrests, but so far, no dice. I really thought this guy was messing with me, but the more that I thought about it, the more I thought maybe not. I could totally see someone having this weigh on their hearts, feeling vulnerable at their daughter's wedding, being just drunk enough to feel untouchable, and trying to get this off their chest. His one mistake was that I was sober at the time, and I remembered every word that he said. I know this is a long shot, but strangers of the internet, if you know of any unsolved murders that fit this description, make sure to send me a direct message. This story took place back in 2003, when I was the spry young age of 8. It was a Saturday, so I was home from school and I had dedicated my entire day to playing Spyro, Year of the Dragon on my PlayStation. My dad normally worked on weekends, and my mom was on a Monday to Friday schedule, so she took the opportunity to grab groceries during her days off. Both mom and dad always made a big point of never leaving me alone for very long, maybe an hour tops before I was a bit older. This particular day, mom had asked me if I wanted to join her on her weekly shopping run, which I was usually incentivized to do so I could sneak some candy bars into the cart. But on that day, I was really vibing with Spyro. I asked her nicely if I could please stay so I could finish my game, and without much protest, she agreed, as long as I did my chores. That sounded like a deal to me, so I happily accepted, and she was on her way. Well, no more than 10 minutes after she had left, I heard our front door open and shut. My initial thought was that maybe mom had forgotten her sunglasses or something, so I stayed in my room a bit longer since I was mid-game anyways. About 60 seconds later, I heard cupboards opening and shutting, and I noticed that the footsteps seemed a bit heavier than my mom's. At this point, I figured that dad had come home from work unexpectedly, so I paused my game and went into the kitchen to see what was happening. When I came around the corner, I froze completely. Before me stood this gigantic strange man that I had never seen before. He was pouring himself some coffee out of our pot that was still heated from a couple hours prior. My memory may not be serving me correctly, but I remember thinking that he was the largest man that I'd ever seen. I'd estimate that he was around 6'5" and must have weighed a solid 280 pounds. Within moments, he noticed my presence. "Oh, hey little man," I remember him saying in a strangely calm demeanor. "I'm just grabbing a little coffee before I head back to work." He must have been in his 50s or so, and had this long, gray beard-mustache combo to boot. He also wore one of those throw-over yellow safety vests that construction workers wear on the job. Every fiber of my being wanted to nope the fuck out of there, but his tone was almost too calming to do so. He seemed genuinely nice, despite being a complete stranger that I knew for a fact was not supposed to be in our home. I managed enough courage to ask him what he was doing here. He responded by saying he was a friend of my dad's and was just popping in for a quick sec. In retrospect, I should have questioned him further, but I was already pretty disturbed by the randomness of it all, so I just said okay and returned to my room where I promptly locked the door behind me. A few minutes passed while he presumably finished his coffee. After that, he knocked on my door and left me with, "I'm headed out for now, sport. Tell your dad I said thanks for the coffee, and I'll see him Monday." He then left through the front door again, and I watched him walk down the street and out of sight from my bedroom window. About a half an hour later, my mom returned from the store, and I was quick to tell her about what had happened. As you can imagine, she was completely and utterly freaked out by the entire ordeal. She made 2 calls, first to my dad's workplace to talk to him, and then to the police. For what it's worth, my dad is an engineer and worked in a relatively small tool and die shop, so I don't think any of his coworkers would have been wearing construction vests. After relaying my description of the man to my dad, he confirmed that there was no way in hell that this was any of his coworkers. And that's what led my mom to calling the police promptly after that. I gave a short statement to a police officer that showed up to the house in order to try to identify the man, but we never received any updates after that. My mom swears that she locked the door that morning, like she always does. So either she misremembered that, or the guy somehow unlocked it on his own without using any sort of brute force. We ended up investing in a pretty high-end home security system for extra assurance after that. And thanks to that guy, I never got out of going to the store with my mom again.